The heavy iron gate of the Westchester estate creaked shut as Eleanor Sterling stood, blocking the driveway, her face a mask of cold arrogance. "I've already told the board this sale is unsuitable for our community. You can take your deposit and leave." She didn't know that the woman standing before her, Sienna Vance, a woman of dark complexion and a sharp-eyed federal prosecutor, was already recording the interaction. Sienna didn't flinch as Eleanor reached out and forcefully shoved a real estate folder out her hands. Sienna looked her dead in the eye and whispered, "Eleanor, you just turned a private housing dispute into a federal civil rights investigation. By the time I'm done, you won't just lose this neighborhood. You'll be explaining your suitability to a grand jury." The sound of a black government SUV pulling up behind them signaled the start of a legal reckoning Eleanor never saw coming. The suburbs of New York were painted in the vibrant golds and reds of October. Sienna Vance and her husband Marcus were standing in front of their dream home, a sprawling colonial estate they had spent years saving for. Sienna, a woman of dark complexion with a presence that radiated quiet power, was dressed in a casual but expensive trench coat, holding the final closing documents. They were met not by the realtor, but by Eleanor Sterling, the self-appointed president of the Homeowners Association, and a woman who believed her pedigree gave her the right to choose her neighbors. Eleanor didn't see a successful family. She saw an intrusion. She stood on the porch, her arms crossed, looking down at them with a smug, dismissive sneer. "I'm afraid there's been a change in plans," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with artificial politeness. "The board has exercised its right of first refusal. We don't feel your family is a cultural fit for this street." "Mrs. Sterling, the contract is signed. The funds are in escrow," Sienna replied, her voice as smooth and dangerous as polished marble. "There is no legal basis for a cultural fit rejection in this state." Eleanor laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Legality is a matter of perspective, dear. And in this neighborhood, my perspective is the only one that matters." Sienna stepped forward to show the stamped approval from the bank, but Eleanor wasn't interested in facts. She was interested in dominance. Eleanor reached out and aggressively grabbed Sienna's forearm, physically barring her path to the front door. The physical abuse of power was jarring. Eleanor shoved Sienna back toward the driveway, her hand pressing firmly against Sienna's shoulder. "I said stay off the property." Eleanor hissed, her face contorted in a sneer. "I've already called the local police to report trespassers. You people always think you can just buy your way into places where you aren't wanted." Sienna suffered the physical contact with terrifying, stoic dignity. She didn't push back. She simply stood her ground as the folders she was carrying hit the gravel. "Mrs. Sterling, you are currently committing a physical battery and a violation of the Fair Housing Act. I suggest you remove your hand before the consequences become permanent." Eleanor didn't listen. She tightened her grip on Sienna's arm, her arrogance blinding her to the danger. "Consequences? I own half the businesses in this town. I am the consequences." She forcefully snatched the house keys from Sienna's other hand and tossed them into the bushes. The tension broke as a local patrol car pulled up, blue lights reflecting off the manicured hedges. Officer Miller, a young man who clearly looked up to Eleanor, stepped out. "Is there a problem here, Mrs. Sterling?" Miller asked, his hand resting on his belt. "These people are trespassing and harassing me, officer," Eleanor lied, pointing an accusing finger at Sienna. "They're trying to force their way into a house they don't own. I want them removed. Now." Miller looked at Sienna and Marcus. "You heard the lady. Move along before I have to get out the cuffs." A high-status neighbor, Judge Harrison, who was out walking his dog, stopped at the edge of the lawn. He knew Sienna from the federal courthouse. He had seen her dismantle organized crime syndicates with a single closing argument. His face went pale as he saw Eleanor pushing her. "Eleanor, stop. Do you have any idea who that is?" the judge called out, his voice filled with genuine alarm. "I know exactly who she is. She's someone who doesn't belong here." Eleanor snapped back, her ego refusing to allow any interference. She turned back to Sienna, a smug grin on her face. "See? Even the law knows who the boss is here." Sienna looked at Officer Miller, then at Eleanor. "Officer, before you take any action, you might want to look at the ID in my left pocket. And Eleanor, you might want to look at the car that just pulled in behind you." The flow shifted from a neighborhood squabble to a federal operation. A black SUV with dark tinted windows and a low-profile siren tucked into the grill pulled into the driveway. Two men in suits stepped out, Federal Marshals. The suspense in the air was thick. The Marshals didn't look at the house. They looked at Officer Miller and Eleanor. One of them held up a badge that made Miller's jaw drop. "Is there a problem, Madam Prosecutor?" The Marshal asked, his voice a low, professional rumble. The flow shifted. The arrogant bully, Eleanor, frozen in place, finally felt the first chill of reality. She looked at the woman she had just shoved, realizing that the trespasser was a high-ranking official of the United States Department of Justice. Just before the shocking reveal, we want to take a quick moment to thank you for your support, love, and kindness. We wouldn't have come this far without you. Subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue to bring you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to the story. Sienna Vance reached into her pocket and pulled out her federal credentials, flipping them open so Eleanor could see the gold seal of the DOJ. "Officer Miller," Sienna said, her voice a razor-sharp blade of authority. "I am Sienna Vance, lead federal prosecutor for the Eastern District. I am here to take possession of my legal residence. This woman has just physically assaulted a federal officer and is currently engaged in criminal housing discrimination." She turned her gaze to Eleanor, whose smug expression was now a mask of pure, stuttering terror. "Eleanor," Sienna said quietly, "you want to talk about suitability for this neighborhood. I think a federal prison cell will be a much better cultural fit for someone with your lack of character. Marshals, take her into custody." The upscale silence of the cul-de-sac was shattered by the rhythmic clicking of handcuffs. This time, they weren't for the Vance family. Eleanor Sterling stood frozen, her mouth agape, as the federal marshals stepped forward. The arrogant queen of the HOA looked down at her own wrists, realizing the woman she had just physically shoved was the same woman who had spent the last decade putting the state's most dangerous criminals behind bars. "Madam Prosecutor," the senior marshal said, stepping between Sienna and Eleanor, "we've been recording the audio from the moment you stepped onto the curb. We have clear evidence of physical battery and verbalized intent to violate the Fair Housing Act." The power shift was total. The unsuitable buyer was now the ultimate legal authority on the property. Eleanor's smugness dissolved into a frantic, stuttering apology. I didn't know. Sienna, Mrs. Vance, this was all a misunderstanding. I was just trying to protect the property values." "You weren't protecting values, Eleanor," Sienna replied, her voice cold and resonant. "You were protecting a legacy of exclusion, and you did it by laying hands on a federal official. The misunderstanding is that you thought your neighborhood rules sat higher than the Constitution." Officer Miller, realizing he had almost participated in a federal civil rights violation, stepped back and lowered his head. He watched as the marshals led Eleanor toward the black SUV. The high-status neighbor, Judge Harrison, walked onto the lawn, his face stern. "Eleanor," the judge said, his voice carrying the weight of the bench, "I've sat on cases where people like you thought they were above the law. It never ends well. You've brought shame to this community and a federal lawsuit to your own doorstep." As Eleanor was guided into the back of the vehicle, the other neighbors, people she had bullied into silence for years, began to step out onto their porches. They weren't there to help her. They watched in silence as the woman who had gatekept their lives was finally removed from her throne. The boss of the neighborhood was now just a defendant in a federal case, stripped of her influence in the span of 10 minutes. "Officer Miller," Sienna said, turning to the young cop, "I suggest you go back to the station and write a very detailed, very honest report. Because if I find a single lie in your statement, I will ensure the DOJ reviews your precinct's funding." Miller saluted sharply and retreated, his arrogance replaced by a desperate need to save his own career. Sienna and Marcus Vance didn't just move into the house. They transformed the neighborhood. After Eleanor was forced to sell her own home to pay for her legal defense and federal fines, Sienna helped reorganize the HOA into an inclusive body that welcomed families based on character, not complexion. The moral resolution saw the Vance family hosting a neighborhood dinner on that very same lawn, a celebration of a new era. Sienna's status in the DOJ reached new heights, and she became a leading voice in housing reform across the country. The gate that Eleanor had tried to shut was now permanently open, a symbol that the law is always stronger than the ego of a bully. Arrogance is a wall you build to keep others out, only to find that you've trapped yourself inside a world of your own making. Never judge a person's worth by your own narrow standards, for the very person you seek to exclude may be the one who holds the power to decide your future. The truth is, true community isn't built on who you can keep out, but on how much room you can make for justice and respect at your table.